Welcome, everyone. My name is Erica Benson. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Program, and I'm delighted to see that so many people are interested in learning a little more about the sabbatical application process. So welcome. I'm going to ask you if you can just turn on your cameras for the first couple of minutes here, because I'd like everyone to introduce themselves. And also, as part of your introductions, of course, your name, your department, and then what it is that you are hoping to get out of this workshop, because I would like to tailor the workshop to your needs. So the PowerPoint I will make available after the session, and as well as the recording. But I'd also like to, we will have time for questions. And like I said, I would like to focus on things that you want to know more about. So I am going to start with Angela Jones, and then I'll ask you to identify, when you speak, identify the next person to go. So, Angela.
All right, thank you. I'm Angela Jones. I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Special Education. And what am I hoping to get out of this? I'm hoping to learn about the process to kind of set up a sabbatical in the near future. So. Oh, and I need to pick somebody. Let me see. How do I see their names bigger? Let's go to Brian.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Hello, all. Can you hear me all right? Yay. Okay, just making sure. So my name is Brian McGinnis. I'm a professor of environmental humanities and American Indian Studies here at UWEC. I am promoted in the fall to associate professor, but actually have intentions of going to full pretty quick. I was a tenured professor in Minnesota and at Madison previous to this job, so I've done this for a while, but am super excited to learn about how UWEC, what the process for applying for sabbatical is, what the terms of sabbaticals are, and I guess my goal is to finish some substantial research projects I've been working on and then apply for full professor following that. So thank you. And I will pick, it looks like Kirsten.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Kirsten Rossi. I am a professor in the Department of Special Education. And I just hope to get more information about the process and maybe some tips or some information that would be helpful along the way in that process from people who have done it previously, just to sort of guide my own process in this. So, and I'll pick Nora. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Nora Mitchell. I'm an associate professor in biology. I'd love to know more about kind of the logistics of the sabbatical process overall, including the application and in the midst of it, and some funding opportunities also. And a little bit about the scope. I've been talking to some folks and they're like, don't propose too much, but also don't propose too little. So, not entirely sure what that looks like. I'll go to Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Calderon. I'm in the psychology department. I'm an associate professor. And I am also interested in all things that everybody has already said. I guess thinking about trying to add something different. I know it really is just sort of like maybe things that people overlook when they fill out their proposals, things that maybe we don't think about including, but we should be thinking about a little bit more strategically, and how to maybe be a little bit more effective with putting together materials. So that's what I would add. And I'll pass now over to Xiao Yu. Is that?
Yep. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Sean Yang, College of Business, Assistant Professor of Management. I would like to know more, basically the whole process, especially I noticed the deadline, if we want to do this next year, the deadline will be early September, right? That's due to the chair. So I would like to know if there's anything we need to do, especially during the summer. Yep. Thank you. Emma, you'll be the next.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Wang. I'm assistant professor of finance, College of Business. I want to know more about the process, so make sure I don't miss any deadlines to submit everything. Yeah, that'd be all. So, am I the last one? Because I feel I'm not the last one. Okay.
I haven't gone yet.
Which one? I'm sorry.
Oh, Gloria.
Gloria, you're next.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gloria Howerton. I'm in geography and anthropology. My camera doesn't seem to work on Teams specifically. And also I can't see any of your videos. I'm not sure why. It works fine on Zoom, but anyway, I'm mostly interested in finding out like what makes a good application versus, I don't want to say like a bad application, but an application that's more likely to be chosen and to get awarded the sabbatical. What are the things that work and haven't worked for people who've applied previously? And is there anybody who hasn't gone yet?
So I'll call on Robert next.
I'm Bob, up in associate professor up in kinesiology. And I think I've kind of read what everybody else has said, learning a little bit about the process and kind of what to do. Haven't really thought about this much until lately. So I think there might be one left.
Ganga, I think, is left.
There we go.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ganga Vadhavkar, and I'm a professor in communication and journalism. I am interested in knowing more about the depth and the scope of what is required in the application process so that it's more kind of focused rather than going all over the place, which is what I tend to do. So working on my weaknesses and seeing how I can overcome them to put together a proposal that meets the requirements. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think we got everyone. All right. So thank you, everyone, for taking a moment to introduce yourselves. Part of the reason for doing that, not only to help me, but also to allow you to know others that might be applying for sabbatical, and maybe folks that you could think about working with, or getting some tips from as you're going through. Can you all see my screen? I need someone to verbally answer, if possible. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So we just did the introduction. So we're going to go to the next page, which is the purpose of the sabbatical. And as I said, I will make this PowerPoint and the video available after our session. So, under the Wisconsin statutes, a sabbatical leave, these are the exact words here, shall be granted for the purposes of enhancing teaching, course, and curriculum development, or conducting research or any other scholarly activities related to instructional programs within the field of expertise of the faculty member taking such leave. So from our perspective at UW-Eau Claire, we really think of sabbatical as an opportunity to enliven your scholarship and teaching, to learn something new, to work with other scholars or in a new environment, and certainly to avoid burnout, which we know for many of us is very real. I also want to note, feel free to interrupt me as we're going through. If you have questions, just turn your mic on and jump in. So sabbatical eligibility, we have several criteria. These are all based on Wisconsin statutes and Board of Regents guidelines. So sabbaticals may be awarded after 6 years of full-time instructional service or its equivalent. If there are leaves of absence during your time here, those are subtracted from the years of service, and those have to be true leaves of absence where you have applied for a leave. Preference is given to those who have not had a leave of absence within the past 4 years. And at UW-Eau Claire, the practice is that sabbaticals are awarded after a successful tenure decision. And then the last eligibility requirement is that if you receive a sabbatical, then you have to return for at least 1 year following the sabbatical leave, or you're asked to return compensation. So that a sabbatical is awarded, then you are required to come back for 1 year. So you probably know that there are 2 basic types of leave. So you can take a 1 semester leave. If you take a 1 semester leave, you receive full pay. You can also take a 2 semester or a full academic year leave. And in that case, you receive 65% of your salary. The year-long sabbaticals are what make the 1 semester sabbaticals possible, because essentially we are, academic affairs is really needing to fund the sabbaticals within the sabbatical program. So the cost savings from those taking the year-long sabbaticals help fund those sabbaticals that are 1 semester, because there is no cost saving on the 1 semester. So the goal within academic affairs is for the net costs of the sabbaticals awarded in a given year to essentially be 0. Does academic affairs sometimes put in additional or find additional funds to help with that? It's my understanding that they do, but the goal really is for the sabbatical program to be able to fund itself. So the scope of the project, when you're thinking about, do I do a 1 semester, do I do a full, a 2 semester or full year leave, the scope of the project should really match the time requested. And someone asked about that. So talking with your colleagues about, does this seem like enough for a 1 year leave, or is this too much for a 1 semester leave? Those are all considerations, and that's something I'm also happy to discuss. If a full semester sabbatical is approved, if you're awarded let me take that back. If you are awarded a full year sabbatical, it can't be changed to a 1 semester, and that's all related to what I said above. So just thinking about the types of projects, this slide is just to give you some indication of some things that you might consider. So if you're thinking about, or if you are early career, recently tenured, those sabbaticals tend to build on or expand on your pre-tenure accomplishments. So it might be that you're converting published articles or manuscripts into a book, for instance. It might be that you have a lot of data that you've accumulated and you really want to get some articles out or chapters or other kinds of publications out. If you're in a creative field, it might be that you want to expand on the collection of creative works that you've done. For instance, these are just, a couple of examples. If you are mid or late career, you might do some of the things that are identified under the early career. You could be continuing the scholarship that you've been doing, but you might also be restarting your scholarship. Let's say you've had a period where you've really been focusing on service, or you've been, for instance, department chair, DPC chair, done some other significant service that has taken you away from scholarship. You might be restarting that. Or you might be wanting to move in a completely new direction with your scholarship. And that could be kind of a high risk, high reward sort of opportunity. And that's something that sabbatical can allow for. Any questions about those? Okay, like I said, feel free to interrupt as we go through. So one of the first things we recommend is really that you communicate with your chair early on. If you are considering applying for sabbatical, talk about the timing of the sabbatical with them. Think about how the courses that you would normally be expected to teach, how they're going to be covered. Giving your chair as many ideas as possible can help in this process. So, is this a scenario where maybe those courses could just not be offered for a semester or a year? If you're teaching courses that have multiple sections, could colleagues take on a few extra students in each of their courses to allow for coverage? Are there colleagues that could take on overloads? Will replacement hires be necessary to cover the courses? So, think about that. It's not your job to decide how that's going to happen, but it certainly can help in conversations with the chair to give them some ideas. Also discussing service, and especially if you have significant service responsibilities generally, giving ideas for how that might be covered. It's the chair's responsibility to work with the deans and they will do that, to talk about coverage and what's needed for sabbaticals. So, like I said, as many ideas as you can give them, that can be helpful, but it is ultimately the chairs and deans that will figure that out. I guess one other thing I want to say to that is that I would not be deterred. I don't want you to be discouraged or deterred from applying for a sabbatical because of those responsibilities. I think sometimes I've heard people say, well, I could never take a sabbatical because, I teach courses that nobody else can teach. There are ways that those courses can be covered. And like I said, I want to really encourage you to just talk with the chair, and the chair and the dean can work that out. Yeah, so in terms of the application timeline, so the proposals for sabbaticals in a given academic year are due, doesn't matter whether it's a 1 semester or 2 semester sabbatical, they're due a year in advance of the start of that academic year. So when our due date of September 10th, 2026, I have the date here wrong. I am going to fix that. Those are sabbaticals for 27, 28. So 27, this should be 27, 28 leave. Those applications are due September 10th, 2026. And so some things that you want to consider. So you want to have your application to the chair no later than September 10th. The chair and the dean will review the forms and they'll send them to ORSP within the week. So before submitting, evaluate your application based on the sabbatical review criteria, and they'll be linked a little bit later in this PowerPoint. They are also on the SharePoint page. They're linked on the SharePoint page for sabbatical leave. Consider asking a colleague to review your proposal. Consider also getting feedback from someone outside your field, and this will become clear in a little bit why you want to do that. And, I can help arrange a review. And if you would like such a review from someone outside your field, then I just ask that you submit your project description portion of your sabbatical to me no later than 4 to 8 weeks before the application is due. So July, early August is a good time to do that. The earlier you submit those, the better, just because it does take a couple of weeks to get people lined up, give them time to review, and then to get you feedback so that you have time to make revisions. But that's certainly something that I'm happy to help facilitate. All right, so let's get to the application, and we'll talk about the process too here. So basically, the application is on BP Logix. It's an e-form. It begins asking for some general information. So the title of the project, whether you're requesting a year or a one semester sabbatical. The abstract is something that you need to provide, and I just want to note here, because this is important, the abstract is really the public face of the sabbatical. So if you are awarded a sabbatical, the abstract that you have on your application is what will be shared with the public, with the Board of Regents, about the sabbatical. So we ask that you describe your sabbatical in the abstract in the third person rather than the first person, not as an I, but as Dr. X, he, she, or they will do this. In that general information, you're also going to give your start date, so when it is that you started at UW-Eau Claire, any leaves of absence that you've had in the past. You do not, like I said, those are only the where you've applied for sabbatical, or sorry, where you've applied for a leave of absence. We'll also ask you to have any past sabbatical leaves on there. And then any external grant applications that you might be doing, applying for to support your sabbatical. Then you'll be asked on the form to list your goals and aims and your list of expected outcomes. There are up to 4 attachments that you'll give to the sabbatical, and I'll talk about those a little more. So the project description, your qualifications and past university contributions, your CV, and then optionally any letters of endorsement. So that might be, it might be a scholar who's familiar with your work who provides a letter. If you're proposing a book, it would be good to have, if you have a contract with a publisher or interest from a publisher, to have a letter of support from them. So the letter of endorsement or letters of support, those are optional, but they can go a long way in helping to support your application. Any questions at this point? Like I said, I'll go into more detail about the project description in particular. Okay, so we will moving on here. So your project description is not long, 6 to 10 pages, right? We ask that you number your pages, that project description is double spaced, excuse me. And you want to start with the aims of the project, the significance to the discipline, and you want to be sure to cite sources and include a bibliography. You'll describe your project approach and your plan, the outcomes for the project, excuse me, and that, think about that as that's how the success of the project is going to be measured or demonstrated. It's very important to have a timeline, and that can just be in list form. In fact, that's, or in table form. And then also some discussion of why time reassignment is needed. So really thinking about giving some thought to why you need reassignment time to be able to accomplish this project, the project or projects that you're proposing. And then another important piece of that project description is the expected benefits. And think about those as not only benefits to you as a researcher, as a professor, as a member of your discipline, but also how your project would benefit your discipline, how it would benefit the university, and how it would benefit students. Any questions about that? Okay. So as part of the e-form as you're submitting, so you'll, like I said, you'll fill out quite a bit of information on the form itself. You'll put your attachments in. There is a comment box, so if there's anything that you, any additional comments that you want to make or any comments you want to make to your chair or dean, you can do that on the form. You will be asked to fill in the names of the chair and dean. And for those of you in the College of Arts and Sciences, as you know, on most e-forms, in the dean slot, you put in Paula, not for the sabbatical e-form. The sabbatical e-form goes to Dean Alex. And then as soon as you hit submit, then your application goes to the chair. The chair will review the application and may add comments to it. Once the chair hits submit, it goes to the dean, and same thing. The dean reviews and adds comments. And then the application gets to ORSP. Once we see that an application is en route, we give it a few days, and then we will remind the chair, if it's sitting with the chair or the dean, ORSP will send reminders to them to review them and move them along to make sure that we get them, like I said, within about a week is our expectation. So there's no fear that your application is going to be hanging out somewhere. We'll make sure that it gets to us once you've submitted it. Okay. So any other questions about the application process before I move on to talk about how the sabbaticals are reviewed, or how the sabbatical proposals are reviewed? Okay. So there is a sabbatical review committee member, or sorry, a sabbatical review committee, and each member of the committee reads every application. So we do not divvy them up. Every member of the committee reads every sabbatical application that is submitted. They first read them independently. They evaluate the proposals using criteria that we'll talk about in a little bit. And the committee's job is to evaluate the proposals based on their merits. So we are not considering anything other than the merit of the application. So we aren't concerned about, oh, how are they going to cover the courses? How are they going to cover the service? That is not the concern of the Sabbatical Review Committee. It's to evaluate the applications on their merit. The committee then comes together in a meeting to discuss all of the applications and to look at the, we pull together the reviews, which are done numerically and with strengths and weaknesses comments. So we pull together all of those evaluations, all of the comments, and the committee looks at those, discusses them, and comes to a consensus in terms of ranking the applications into up to 4 tiers. So highly recommended, recommended, worthy of support, and not recommended. Sometimes all 4 of those categories are used. Sometimes only 2 or 3 of those categories are necessary. The committee then makes recommendations to the provost. And at the same time, so they rank all of the applications, they put them into tiers. That's the recommendation that goes to the provost. The proposals are also shared. The full proposals are also shared with the provost. The provost then meets with the deans and the associate vice chancellors to consider the recommendations, the chair and dean evaluations, and at that point is when they figure out the financial logistics. It's at the provost level that the decisions are made about which sabbaticals will be awarded. And it's the provost's responsibility to forward their recommendations for sabbaticals to the UW system. That typically happens in late November. And at that time, the applicants are informed about whether their sabbatical is being recommended or being awarded or not. Those awards are shared at the December Board of Regents meeting. And then in January, and I don't know why this is, but the state, the Board of Regents guidelines say that the sabbatical awards cannot be formally made until after after January 1st. So it's in January, early January, that those who have been informed that their sabbatical is being recommended will actually receive the formal award notice with the contract. So you'll find
Erica,
out, like I said,
Erica,
in late November.
Sorry, Erica, I just had a quick question
Yes.
on these recommendations and the discussion and review. Is there ever any consideration about the amount of sabbaticals that have been awarded to different departments or different colleges? Because I'm just thinking, because in education, we really stink at doing this. And there are very, very few people that do this. And so I was just curious if, as you are looking and reviewing and making those recommendations, is there a consideration to how often a particular college or a particular department actually has someone applying for sabbatical and getting sabbatical?
Yes, I would say that comes into play with the provost and the deans and the AVCs meet. That is a big part of I know that is a part of their discussion. That's with the sabbatical review committee, that is less of a consideration because our responsibility is to judge the applications based on their merit. But like I said, I know that is something that the deans, the provosts, the AVCs take into consideration. Yeah, thanks for asking about that.
I have another question kind of along those lines. Is there like I know it'll be different from year to year, but is there kind of a percentage of applications that end up being approved?
So hold on to that thought, Gloria, and I will come back. I've got a slide that'll show that, and I'll say more about that when we get there. Yeah. Okay. So any other questions?
I have a question about, oh, sorry, Erica, this is Christine.
Nope, go ahead.
I was curious, sort of, when you have those different like rankings, I'm wondering if there is something that as a committee people tend to notice that would take a proposal from like a recommended to a highly recommended proposal, like knowing of course there are different disciplines and the proposals likely look very different, but just wondering if there's some aspect of those that help them to stand out.
I'm sorry, somehow I got let me see if I can go back. Why I'm only forwarding. Let me go back here. Okay, there we go. Christine, yes, so thank you for that. So I think the next slide here is helpful. So I have linked here the sabbatical review criteria, and essentially they fall into these categories. And so, you know, we do treat these are treated equally, and yet there are some things that really stand out, I would say, and can move a sabbatical really into the highly recommended category. You know, that the concept of the project being proposed, that it is something that is, you know, important to the discipline, that it is something that that will have an impact on the work that a faculty member is doing at UW-Eau Claire. Those are things that can really make a project stand out, that it has clear outcomes and goals. these are things, like I said, that sometimes we don't see a clear concept. We don't see a lot of the literature supporting the significance of the project. Those kinds of things, really thinking about that, that what's being proposed is something of importance, not only significant to the discipline, but also important to the work that a faculty member is doing at UW-Eau Claire. Like I said, really clear outcomes and scope, that we can see what it is that is going to happen with this project. What kinds of things, if we're talking about, that someone is producing, say, 2 or 3 published articles, that it's really clear what it is that they're going to do. That they have a good plan, that they have the logistics figured out, that there's a time frame. Like I said, having that timetable that's laid out in table format that's really easy to access for reviewers, I think that's especially important. That it's accessible to the reviewers, that the application is something that they can understand. And I know that can be challenging when you have when you're doing very specialized work in your discipline, but making an effort to make sure that it is understandable to the reviewers, that's going to be more highly rated. That you have clear deliverables and benefits. That you have a record of successful scholarship, teaching, service. And the last point is really how this fits in your career arc. So how, when you think about that, you can articulate how this is part of your career trajectory. Nora, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if like the teaching aspect is incorporated into any of these because I've been looking through some of my colleagues' ones, and some of them are pretty focused on the incorporation of teaching things as well as pedagogical practices. Like, would that make something ranked higher than if it was just research or creative activity focused?
Say the last part again, just the last sentence that you said there.
If it was including both of research and a teaching component, would that make it be ranked higher than if it was just on the research aspect?
I think it could. So all other things being equal, because, teaching is part of what we do here, right? So you can imagine that if you have a research project that has direct impact on your teaching and it will transform how you're teaching your courses, that certainly can be, like I said, all other things being equal, that might get a little bit higher rating than one where it's the exact same project but doesn't have that component. Yeah.
I know it's supposed to be, released from teaching to focus on this thing, but being released from teaching just to focus on teaching also seems like a fine line to walk sometimes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, other questions? And Christine, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay. So as I said, we give 10 points to each of these categories, and then those that are proposals that fall within the 54 to 60 rating are considered outstanding. 48 to 53 are strong proposals. 42 to 47 are fair proposals. It's very unusual that we have projects or proposals that would fall any lower than 41. But those, you can imagine, are then considered weak proposals. So just to give a little bit more information about the Sabbatical Review Committee. The Sabbatical Review Committee is also the IRCA Review Committee. So those folks are doing double duty, one in the fall, one in the spring. They are all tenured faculty members, and ideally they have been awarded a sabbatical, but as you can imagine, as Kirsten mentioned a little bit ago, sometimes that's a little challenging in some colleges. So they have to at least be tenured, ideally have been awarded a sabbatical. We have at least one representative from each college, and then within the College of Arts and Sciences, there is someone from STEM, someone from social science, someone from arts, and someone from humanities. There are 8 members of the committee, and I chair the committee, but really I act as a facilitator. I do not rate the proposals. I do not rank them. I am just facilitating the discussion among the committee. And I will say that the reviewers have a heavy burden because, as I said, every reviewer reads every application. So there's a lot to read for them within a pretty tight timeline. And so some things that do help is when, you take that extra time to make sure that your proposal is succinct, well-written, doesn't have, a lot of surface mistakes in it, just makes it a lot easier and it shows that you've taken the time to really make sure that it has been edited and you're presenting your best work here. They also the committee members appreciate proposals that are well organized, that have headings and subheadings to guide them through the narrative. And also, as I mentioned a little earlier, that the proposal is accessible to scholars outside your discipline. Not everyone is going to have someone on the committee from their discipline. So it puts an extra burden on you as applicants to make sure that your proposal is accessible to others, that they can understand what it is that you're doing. And that sometimes, like I said, that has been a barrier for some applicants and for some proposals. Ganga? Ganga, if you're speaking, I'm not hearing you. Ganga, I'm not hearing you. Is your microphone muted? Okay, I'm sorry, Ganga, I'm not hearing you, so I'm going to have to move on. Okay, so finally, there will be a report. If you are awarded sabbatical, you will have to write a report. If you just take a fall semester sabbatical, that report is due March 1st. ORSP will remind you about that. If you do a full year sabbatical or a spring sabbatical, you have until October 15th. We do provide you a template from our office when we would send the reminders. Essentially, it pulls the goals and aims and expected outcomes from your application. And then you are expected to, in 2 to 4 pages, address those goals and outcomes, what you did, what you accomplished, and any reasons that you might have deviated from those. Because we all know you're applying for these a year before you're going to do the work. Things change. So if you have deviated from the goals and outcomes that you had identified in the application, just explaining why that is. And that report goes to the chair and it's copied to the dean, the provost, and ORSP. Okay, so funding for your sabbatical leave. So you might try to apply for some extramural grants. And I would say, starting as soon as possible if you're thinking about a leave to help fund if you're thinking about a full year. Starting to work with Heather Johnson-Schmitz, our manager of grants and contracts, right away to think about some opportunities for funding with external grants. There are some internal grants that can help with sabbatical leave. And if you do get that notice in November that you are being recommended for sabbatical, I will send you a reminder in December that IRCA applications are due January 15th. So the University Research and Creative Activity applications due January 15th. You can request up to $4,000 for travel, supplies, services. And those are awarded every other year. So you cannot have an IRCA the year before your sabbatical and apply again. So that's just make sure that the year that you're applying for sabbatical, you don't also apply for that year for an IRCA. But like I said, after you find out you're awarded, if you're awarded in November of 2026, then apply in January of 2027 for the IRCA that will then be applicable for your 2027-28 sabbatical year. You can also apply for a small research grant. Those are typically up to $500 due at the first of each month. And it's possible that a workshops and special projects travel grant might apply for your for something you would be doing on sabbatical. Those are up to $1,500. If you're earning income while on sabbatical, your sabbatical income cannot exceed your regular salary. And that's something, this is why we ask you on the application, if you're applying for grants, or if you think you might be having a contract through another institution and being paid for some work while on sabbatical, that is possible, but it cannot exceed your regular salary. And there are just a few hoops that you might need to jump through with HR as part of that process. So if you are going to be employed while on sabbatical, that'll be a conversation to work with academic affairs and with HR to just take care of that. And then some key guidelines we always say, as you know, sabbatical is a privilege. It's not a right. It is a competitive process to apply for it. So that becomes clear. The sabbatical salary and any grants or awards cannot exceed your salary. The exception is if you're getting cost reimbursement, that is not considered salary. So if you're traveling somewhere and there is someone covering your travel or your living expenses while you're working, say, somewhere else, that's not considered salary. Again, you cannot have paid employment during sabbatical leave unless that is stipulated as part of your leave. And that has happened in some cases. We say come back for that year after sabbatical or you pay it back. You have the obligation to do a final report. And then, as I said, the program strives to be cost neutral. And then, Gloria, you asked about sabbatical, percentage of sabbaticals awarded. And you can see here on this slide that, it goes anywhere. The lowest that we've had in recent years is 56.3% awarded. The highest that we've had awarded is 100%. And you can see the applications have ranged from about 13 applications to 24. And so there are a lot of factors in this, what percentage are awarded. I would say the biggest factor has to do with being able to cover the cost of the sabbatical. So when we have more, let's say if there are 2 to 3 times as many one semester sabbaticals as full year sabbaticals, those are typically the years where a lower percentage are reported. But I will say that academic affairs works very hard to award as many sabbaticals as possible. I know that there are some other institutions within the UW system that award 1 sabbatical per college. Our institution, as you can see, does not do that. And like I said, I really give kudos to our friends in academic affairs and our provosts who have made sabbatical a priority. Okay. So last slide here, just a link to that SharePoint page with this information that I've talked about and more. I will send you all the recording as well as the PowerPoint, and it'll also be available on the SharePoint page. I'll get that up there within the next couple days. Any questions, you can certainly email orsp@uwc.edu or me. And Heather is the person to reach out to if you're thinking about some external grant funding, generally or specifically for your sabbatical. So any other questions?
Erica, this is Teresa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was left out of the round because I couldn't get
Oh,
my
I'm so sorry,
microphone
Teresa.
to work, but that's okay. I'm an old timer and I've had one of these before, so I was just trying to see what's new. In terms of the numbers that were granted, how many of them were year projects last year and how many were semester? Thank you for doing this.
So let me just think. Last year, I believe 5 to 6 were full year. I would have to look, but I think it was around for these 2 years of 2025, 2026. Can you still see the PowerPoint or no? Nope. Okay. Sorry about that. For some reason now it's not letting me go back to share that. But like I said, I think it was about 5 to 6 full year and 9 or so that were one semester. That
Thank
was
you.
the breakdown.
Thanks.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right. Nora?
I'll ask one. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the hand raise. Just quick question about service stuff. Like, I know, are we allowed to do any service work, or if we have other like administrative potential appointments in the university, are we allowed to keep doing those or not?
I think that's a negotiation
Okay.
with the chair and the dean, because
Okay.
that is, yeah, that's really a negotiation on that part, on your part, if that's something that you still want to do or not. I know they definitely will not allow you to continue teaching. That is one thing
Yes.
that there have been some people that have said, well, I have to teach this one course. And that has not been, I have never seen that granted.
And that's same for independent studies also?
They
Which don't really
probably do not
yeah.
want to see an independent study on the books if you are on sabbatical.
Okay, because I know those
Yeah.
don't count towards their teaching load, so it's kind of a
Right.
gray area.
Yep. Yeah, but
Okay.
again, that'd be a good question to ask. Yeah,
Okay.
Angela.
Sorry, kind of in that vein. While on sabbatical, could we be doing like student faculty research as well? Okay.
Yes, and you can receive internal grants for those while you're on sabbatical. That is possible. Yeah. Yeah, and it's still possible if you are on a 1-semester sabbatical, you can teach winterim and or summer courses. If you're on a full year sabbatical, you cannot teach winterim, but you can teach during the summer. So that's certainly possible. Yeah. Emma and then Teresa.
Oh, that's just my question. So, I got awarded to go on a student immersion trip in Thailand, but that's in January. So if I only apply for 1 semester of sabbatical leave, I think I'm able to do that, right?
Yes, you
I
are
just
able
wanted
to
to
do
confirm.
that.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
but do let Jeff know that that's happening, because he may need to just shift any payment that's coming to you to make sure that it doesn't happen during the semester that you're on sabbatical.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, Teresa?
I had one other question. In your flow chart, you showed that once it leaves our campus, it goes to the UW. And I had just two questions. Does the person know that their proposal has been sent on to UW? And does the UW administration have any say in which ones are awarded, or is it more of a formal process? Thank you.
So, great question. So your proposal is not forwarded, it is just your abstract. So the title, the length of the leave, and your abstract is shared with the Board of Regents. In years past, the Board of Regents had some say in the awarding of sabbaticals. They have delegated that authority to the campuses. So unless there is some very, very, very unusual situation that would happen, they do not have a say. But in the past, and the Board of Regents did approve the sabbaticals. Now you might have noted, I said they are informed. Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Good. Any other questions? And Ganga, do you want to try again?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
So I wanted to know when the review committee reviews the proposals, are they blind reviews? Do you take out the names, any identifiers, or everything
No.
goes as is?
They are not blind reviews. So it would be almost impossible to take out any identifiers from the applications for the reviewers reviewing. Yeah.
Yeah. And a second question I had was, if one is granted sabbatical, but while in the process of applying for sabbatical, you also apply for any funding, but that's not finalized, and if it comes through later, is that something we have to then notify, or does it matter until and unless the funding, like you said, exceeds your salary? Either way, notify, or is it too late and you can't take that funding?
No, you can certainly take the funding, but it's likely that you'll need to notify, just notify academic affairs, because there is, in January, the contract will indicate, like, if you are going to be paid, that needs to be, that's something that needs to be part of the agreement. And so even if you receive funding after you've signed that agreement, notifying is sufficient to be. I mean, I haven't seen any cases where that hasn't been okay. It's just, yeah, they just want to make sure that that what you receive won't exceed your salary. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I wish you all luck finishing up the semester and working on your sabbatical proposals. I think there was a question early on about timing, and I would say it's a good idea to work on that sabbatical proposal over the summer. Really, take time to develop it, take time to put your best work forward. And so I think the summer is a great time to be working on proposals. Talk to colleagues, ask colleagues if you can see a copy of a proposal that they've submitted. That can be a good, to see some successful proposals. That can be a good thing to do. So talk with your colleagues about that. And if you don't have any colleagues, let me know, and I will ask around and see if anyone is willing to let me share their successful proposal that would be in a discipline that's maybe akin or similar to, or a project that might be in line with what you're thinking.
Thank you,
All right.
Erica.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thank
great
you.
rest of
Thank
the
you.
week.
Thank you.